Being a ninja can be a gruesome life, so in this video we're going to be ranking the 16 most brutal deaths in the Naruto series. And if you've never read the manga, you'll be surprised by the amount of censorship there was in the anime. So stick around to see how brutal things got in the manga here. Starting off with number 16, the most mild one in the list, but still pretty damn gruesome. It's going to be Haku's death. Kakashi was going to stab and kill Zabuza with a Raikiri, but Haku intervenes in the last second and takes the Raikiri for Zabuza. Kakashi's arm completely passes through Haku's chest, destroying his heart, and it splashes blood everywhere on Kakashi, on Zabuza who's standing behind Haku. Haku spits blood all over. It's a mess, and it feels more brutal than other Chidori/Raikiri kills like Ren's, for example, because of the amount of blood, and simply because of the impact that scene had as well. It was the first arc, and it was already pretty damn violent, and we're gonna get more deaths from the Land of Waves arc on this list. It was an insane arc, and a great way to start the series, showing how the Naruto world could be from time to time. For number 15, we have Dosu's death. He was clawed down by Gaara in a partial transformation of Shukaku, which mostly happens off screen. Dosu was all like, "Oh, I'm gonna challenge you, Gaara, because I'm gonna fight Sasuke in the Chunin exams." Little did he know Gaara was a demon of sorts, and he absolutely destroyed Dosu, off-screening the dude, to the disappointment of many Dosu fans who never got to see the guy doing anything else, even though he had a very cool design. Now, this is gonna be on 15th place because of how Dosu looks after what Gaara does to him, but because it's off-screen, it's not gonna be any higher than this. But you can see that his body was pretty much shredded by Gaara. And because we didn't see what actually did it to him, it just made us even more frightened of Gaara himself, which was a great way to foreshadow things to come during the final round of the Chunin exams. Number 14, we have Zabuza's death. After doing his mad dash to take out Gato, Gato's thugs pierced Zabuza all over his body, with several weapons that stick out of him and were just hanging in there. And as Zabuza had reached and was stabbing Gato, the thugs were still piercing his back. It was just horrible. Once he's done with Gato, he just collapses from his wounds, and Kakashi has to take him next to Haku for his final moment. In what's become one of the most impactful scenes in the Naruto series, and another one from the Land of Waves arc that really sets up the tone and what the story is going to be about. But just looking at Zabuza standing there with dozens of weapons sticking from his body, blood all over him, that's brutal, but also badass. Number 13, we have Jiraiya. His death was kinda similar to Zabuza's in a way. He was pierced by several weapons, but his was a little bit worse, I would say. And that's because of the number of things that happened to Jiraiya during his death. First, he got his arm blown up, then he got his throat crushed, then he got pierced by 5 Rinnegan rods on his back as the paths of pain converged on Jiraiya and just stabbed him all over the place. But because of Jiraiya's guts and the fact that he had to pass the message that the real one was not among them, somehow Jiraiya managed to write a message on Fukasaku's back. And I've made a video about this, but this is an insane feat of intelligence. Go watch that video after this one. And after he wrote the message, Pain shot a freaking Asura Path hand that exploded on Jiraiya and sent him plummeting down the ocean. It was a very sad and impactful death, but if we think about it, it was very brutal in many ways. And given he's such a beloved character, seeing him getting bitten up like that would obviously be shocking for the audience. Number 12, we have Gato's death, another from the Land of Waves. After Naruto taught no jutsu Zabuza, and Zabuza, for the first time in who knows how long, reaches inwards and finds emotions and humanity in himself, he just makes a mad dash at Gato. Especially because Gato was provoking him by stepping on Haku's body and things like that. It wasn't great. And as I said before, he was being pierced all over his body by Gato's thugs. But when he reaches Gato, well, first he pierces Gato's stomach with a kunai Naruto landed to him. And by the way, he was using the kunai with his mouth, which makes the scene even cooler because Kakashi had disabled his arms beforehand. And not satisfied with piercing Gato in the gut, he sort of beheads Gato, and it's the first beheading of the Naruto series in the very first arc. Isn't this a fun children's manga? And by the way, as I said before, he was doing it with his mouth. The kunai was in his mouth. Now, obviously, the scene is a little bit censored, even in the manga. If you haven't seen the manga, you don't know this happened because they completely censor it in the anime. In the manga, we just see the dark silhouette of the characters as Gato's head flies away, but in the next panel, we actually see Gato's head landing on the ground next to his thugs and blood dripping everywhere. It's pretty damn gruesome and brutal, and Gato obviously deserved that. And Zabuza definitely feels like a demon during the scene, but he channeled his powers for his humanity this time, and for Haku's memory. It's just a very cool scene. The Land of Waves arc is underrated, especially in the manga because the anime was so slow with it. The manga's definitely better, but regardless, it was a great arc to begin the series with. And by the way, we're not done with the Land of Waves arc in this list yet. Number 11. Nawaki's death. Now, if you don't remember, Nawaki is Tsunade's younger brother. The dude that looks exactly like Naruto but has brown hair, and instead of having whiskers, he has like red cheeks. We don't see how he dies in the manga. We just see the scene of Tsunade arriving to, well, where they're leaving his body in the Leaf Village because he got back from a mission in the Second Great Ninja War, and he's dead. And as Tsunade is about to go see Nawaki, Orochimaru tells her, kinda maniacally, that, oh, don't even bother, you're not gonna recognize him. That's just something else, Orochimaru. Now, to be fair, he was looking sad before Tsunade spoke, so you can kinda see how Orochimaru was twisted, but still somehow caring about Tsunade and Jiraiya. In the anime, though, we get a bit of an additional scene, and we see that Orochimaru and Nawaki were on the same mission. Nawaki was very excited, so much so that Orochimaru remarks on that fact, and then Nawaki just Leroy Jenkins and explodes in the middle of the battlefield because he probably stabbed on a paper bomb mine or something, and yeah, that's why he's not recognizable anymore. This death may not be on screen, but if Orochimaru acknowledges the brutality of it, I just have to rank it really damn high. And don't forget, Nawaki was 12 years old too, so yeah, it's pretty bad. Number 10. Now we have several deaths happening at once because they were all the same type of death. The Mist Ambu army that died trapped in the wood-style vortex. When Obito goes absolutely ballistic upon seeing Rin dying to Kakashi's Raikiri, he starts to destroy and completely annihilate the Mist Ambu battalion. At the end of the fight, when Obito is looking at Rin's collapsed body in the middle of that pond of blood, we also see this massive wood-style release. That's essentially thick wood-style branches rising in a vortex out of the earth. And they're pretty damn tall, and among those branches we see crushed Mist Ambu ninjas all over them. Dozens of Mist Ambu died to that jutsu, and I can only imagine the way dying to wood style like that, being crushed by the wood as you're lifted off the ground, bones crushing, muscles getting ripped apart, and seeing your comrades going through the exact same thing you were going through, just brutal, man. For number 9, we have Fu Yamanaka with the Edo Tensei sacrifice. Now, this also applies to every other person that was used as an Edo Tensei sacrifice, it's just that we don't know most of them. We know Kin and Zaku were used as Edo Tensei sacrifices back in Naruto Part 1, when Orochimaru brought back Tobirama and Hashirama, but we see the process actually happening to Fu Yamanaka as Kabuto is casting Edo Tensei on him as a sacrifice, bringing back Torune, which Obito had just killed by breaking his neck a few panels before because he's demanding an explanation from Kabuto of how Edo Tensei works. We see that ash and dust of the Edo Tensei collecting and coalescing around Fu Yamanaka, and he starts to scream in a pretty damn agonizing way. You just have to assume that as your body is being taken over by the jutsu, and this soul that has died is taking over your body and becoming something else, that has to hurt. Yeah, it's kinda quick, but it's brutal because of how it violates you. It's not as if Kabuto is piercing a kunai in your heart and killing you that way. No, he's doing something way more foul. Desecrating your body and turning it into something else, something evil. And obviously you're going to be feeling horrific pain. Number 8. The Alliance ninjas that died to Pakura Scorch style. We don't see Scorch style a whole lot in the series, we just know that it's the fusion of fire and the wind style into the KK Genkai Scourge style. Pakura, this Jonin from the Sand Village, uses these orbs of fiery wind around her, which are the Scourge-style orbs, to hit other people in the Alliance. And that's when the brutality comes in, because Scourge-style is set to boil all the water in the target's body. They turn essentially into very weird, ugly-looking mummies and die in agony. You can see them screaming as their skin turns dark from the Scourge style, and they just collapse dead like mummies. It's horrible. Number 7, we have the Mist Ambu that dies to Obito's wood-style cut springs. If you don't remember that jutsu, it's the one where Obito uses a wood-style piercing implement, which looks like a branch or something. He pierces that on the target, but then the branch expands and pretty much explodes out of the target on the other side with several branches. I don't have to say how much blood is involved in that, but it just looks absolutely brutal. It's almost as if the tree is growing everywhere in your body and trying to escape, and when it does, it just kind of explodes out. It's horrible. For number 6, it's going to be another Mist Ambu ninja that Obito also uses the cut springs on. They explode out of the Ambu's body, but Obito, in his fit of rage, starts to pummel that person into a bleeding pulp as the other Ambu members watch in horror, and Obito just screams, punching and destroying that person till, well, then this Ambu turned into ground beef pretty much. And yeah, that's a more brutal way to die than just to the wood style that Obito used before, because he decided to destroy you with his bare hands. Absolutely brutal. For number 5, we are going to have Kisame's death. My second favorite Akatsuki death. It only loses to Datara's death, and by far the most brutal Akatsuki death. It doesn't even compare to any of the others. After Kisame was captured, and Aoba was almost about to extract vital information from his mind using his mind invasion jutsu, Kisame managed to break out of Yamato's wood-style restraints and uses a water barrier around him, and then he summons a swarm of sharks that eat him away. And he did that so he would die and not give any information to Aoba. The sharks simply devour Kisame inside that bubble of water, turning it into crimson, bloody water. And that's just a gruesome but badass way to go, staying loyal to the Akatsuki up until the very end, just like Kisame does. For number 4, we have one of the weirdest scenes in the manga, I would say, and probably the most censored scene in the anime of Naruto, if you don't count scenes that were completely cut out of the story. The weird thing about this scene is that we don't know anything about the characters involved in it, the characters dying and the character doing the killing, so it's kind of weird, but it is absolutely brutal. You see, when Sasuke was going to collect Jugo from his hideout, they were heading to the prison and there was a breakout of curse mark users. Now, Kishimoto does a bait and switch here. He makes us believe that one of these curse mark users is going to be actually Jugo, and that he's very formidable and dangerous. Turns out that guy was not Jugo, and he was not nearly as strong as Jugo or Sasuke for that matter, because Sasuke one-shots him with a very swift and cool-looking slash attack with his sword. That's one of the coolest panels in Naruto, Sasuke posing with his sword, aura forming. I just like that a lot. But before that, to set up that curse mark user, which we don't know the name of, as a massive danger, there's a 2-page spread where there are like 20 or so people from that prison, wardens that is, that are destroyed and demolished, sunken on the prison walls and ground with blood everywhere and their bodies mangled. They were all killed by that curse mark user, and in the 2-page spread, the curse mark user is actually crushing the skull of a character we just don't know the name of into the wall. That guy especially was a brutal death. The others were too, but that one just, drew the short end of the stick, I suppose. And if you compare the manga version to the anime version, there's literally no blood at all in the anime version, and this is one of the bloodiest panels in the Naruto manga. It's kind of funny. Moving on to number 3, we're going to have Sakon and Ukon's deaths, which, well, they happen exactly at the same time because they die through the same jutsu. After Kankura arrives, saving Kiba from Sakon and Ukon, he has a brief exchange with them, and he pretty much beats them very quickly, trapping them inside one of his puppets, and using a jutsu called the Puppet Art of the Iron Maiden. This jutsu took obvious inspiration from the medieval torture method called the Iron Maiden, where somebody was put inside this essentially iron coffin with spikes, and you just close the coffin. You understand what happens, the spikes come in, person dies and all. So Kankuro traps Sakon and Ukon in one of his puppets, and the other puppet, it disassembles itself into several parts that's turned into essentially bladed weapons that Kankuro can control with his chakra threads, and he brings all those blades into the enclosed puppet, which is strapping Sakon and Ukon. All the blades enter that puppet through small little gaps that were around it, and they pierce Sakon and Ukon from the inside. Blood drips out of the puppet. Sakon and Ukon scream and die a gruesome death. Now, even though we technically don't see them dying on screen, we just see the outside of the puppet, it's absolutely brutal. Can you imagine being trapped in that dark place, not being able to get out, and then being pierced from every side? There's a claustrophobic element to this death that just makes it even worse. And the absolute brutality of Kankuro trapping them and just doing that to them. This jutsu has always felt really cool to me, because of how uncaring it is. And while Kankuro is performing that jutsu and throughout the entire fight against Sakon and Ukon, he's kind of giving a performance, which just makes things even more interesting. Oh, killing the dude for him is just like, yeah, a little puppet show performance. Let me show it to you what I can do. The final shot with the two puppets combined together and the blood dripping out of them, it's just cool but chilling at the same time. Moving on to number 2, this is another one that was extremely censored in the anime. It's Kaisa's death. If you don't remember who Kaisa was, he was Inari's stepdad from the Land of Waves arc. The guy that was killed by Gato and his thugs. The way they went about killing this poor dude, it was just unnecessarily brutal. First of all, they cut off his arms, which is not something that happened in the anime. His arms are just like purple and weird and kind of hurt in the anime, but no, they're not present at all in the manga. They're cut off and he's bleeding from his stumps. And they did that just to torture the poor guy. After that, they literally crucify him and they just leave the dude hanging there until he dies. It's not a great way to go. I mean, yeah, he's not nailed, but he is tied to like a cross, so it's horrible regardless. He didn't have arms to be nailed anyway, so how can you even do that? But yeah, Gato's Mafia, they were just ruthless. What can I say? And before we move on to number 1, the most brutal death on this list, I am going to list an honorable mention, which is technically not a death, but almost one, I suppose. It's kind of weird, which is going to be Hidan's death, or lack thereof. I don't know. The thing is, Shikamaru plans out his entire fight against Hidan, and even cocks it to a certain extent. He traps Hidan with the paper bombs, digs an entire pit, which he sets up before the fight, and Hidan is just hanging on it, and then he tosses his cigarette to ignite the paper bombs and explode Hidan into several pieces. Now, interestingly enough, when Hidan falls into the pit, his disassembled head is still talking and screaming, so he clearly wasn't dead by that point. Oh, and by the way, they censor this scene as well, because in the manga, Shikamaru tosses Asuma's lighter, not his own cigarette. Yes, Shikamaru starts to smoke after Asuma's death. In the manga, this doesn't happen in the anime. Censorship again. But going back to Hidan's death, it's absolutely brutal to be completely blown up into several pieces. However, obviously he doesn't die from it, but the data books state that Hidan died of malnutrition while trapped in that pit, which I guess is a very brutal way to go, like completely blown up and just agonizing of malnutrition down there, being smashed by all the rocks that Shikamaru tossed on top of Hidan to just completely make sure nobody would get Hidan back. However, it's much more interesting if Hidan stays there alive forever. That's why I make this an honorable mention, because in my mind, Hidan is still alive and just trapped in there for all eternity. Because that's the whole point of the story. By cursing Asuma, Hidan cursed himself, and he's gonna be down there forever. Which also makes Shikamaru's revenge a much more interesting scene. Not only did he use Hidan's powers against him and Kakuzu, but he also used Hidan's powers for his own punishment. He cannot die down there. He has to stay there forever as a punishment for what he did, which is very interesting to me. I just kind of hate what the data books did there, but data books don't count. They're not in the manga. It's whatever. Moving on to the #1 most brutal death in the Naruto series. Comment down below if you have a guess. Now, this is really a type of death because it happens more than once, but I'm going to pick a specific character, which is going to be Midare from the Rain Village, a guy that dies in the Forest of Death, to our one and only Gaara of the Desert. That scene is the first time we see Gaara's powers actually working and how powerful and terrifying he is, not just in the way he attacks and kills people, but also in his defense. We're talking about the deaths here, right? So we see the Sand Funeral, Sand Coffin routine here for the very first time. And for some reason, these Sand Brothers have something about trapping their opponents in extremely claustrophobic jutsus and killing them afterwards in cold blood. Gaara's, however, is far more brutal than Kankuro's, and Kankuro's already ranked pretty damn high, but Gaara just takes the pot. Because the sand wraps itself all around the opponent, just contributing to that feeling of complete powerlessness. Can you imagine just being trapped by that sand, not being able to move at all, and knowing you were going to die? I would say it's worse than being trapped by Kankuro's puppet. Then, to show off or just to enjoy himself, Gaara raises you off the ground up into the air and closes his hand, crushing the sand in the coffin, and the sand essentially crushes you and explodes outwards. You become mush. You become just a mixture of blood, muscle, and bone that explodes outwards with the sand, and in this very cheeky way, Gaara uses the fan from Midari himself to avoid the falling rain of blood and sand. The panel when the sand coffin explodes and the blood gushes everywhere is absolutely brutal. It's very much censored in the anime. The blood is dark. You can't really tell that's blood and mush. But in the manga, it's just something else. Also, Midari's teammates suffer the same fate as him. It's just that it wasn't really on screen. And also, those two Chunins from the Land of Grass that tried to rough up Gaara before he was going to fight against Sasuke because their feudal lord bet on Sasuke to win, they received the pretty similar fate as well. They were crushed by the sand, and Naruto and Shikamaru were also crushed as well because they were about to cross Gaara in the hallway as they were going up and Gaara was going down, and I mean, it wouldn't be very fun for them to meet Gaara in that situation. So yeah, Gaara's killing a lot of people in very brutal ways, and it's cool to watch. I liked menacing, evil Gaara. He is my definition of Gaara when I think of him. I know most people are not like that, but because I grew up with that Gaara, it's just what I think about when I think of Gaara. Now watch this other video right here to check out every single time the Naruto manga was extremely censored in the anime. Please subscribe if you haven't, ring notifications so you know when the videos come out, like the video if you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.